o'clock. Good evening. I'd like to call the meeting to order at 7 o'clock and ask that the city clerk read the statement of compliance with the Open Public Meetings Act into the record.
This meeting is being held in compliance with the Open Public Meetings Act with the annual advertisement in the Trenton Times. The meeting notice was provided to the Henry County Democrat and the Trenton Times, individuals on the listserv, department heads, the city engineer, and city attorney. The meeting agenda provides for all action items known at the time of publication and is subject to change. The meeting is being streamed live through the Zoom meeting platform.
May I have roll call, please?
Councilwoman Lambert?
Here.
Councilman Sanders?
Here.
Councilman Stegman?
Here.
Council President Taylor?
Here.
Mayor Noack?
Here. All right. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance and then remain standing for a moment of silence. Pledge of
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please stay standing for a moment. I'd like to have a moment of silence for all the people here in Lambertville who are still greatly afflicted by the flooding from Ida. We were with the governor today and out on that spot, and I was very reminded that people are still suffering great personal losses here in the city, and let's keep them in mind for a moment of silence, please. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Let's just dig right in. We have a resolution tonight first on the agenda. It's Resolution 81-2022. This is a resolution to amend the temporary budget. This is a resolution that will allow the city to continue to operate under the temporary budget until the 2022 budget has been adopted. Are there any questions from the council about this resolution?
Is this just perfunctory, or is there special circumstances? Are there special circumstances?
Well, the circumstances that we haven't adopted the budget yet, we need to continue to fund it, so it's not, I wouldn't call it perfunctory.
So I'm just trying to understand. So because we intended to introduce the budget tonight, we have to put this in place because we're not? Is that it?
No, we would have had to do this anyway tonight because we wouldn't be, we would.
Oh, we would have
Yeah,
only
the budget's
introduced
not-
it.
Yeah,
not
we've
passed.
only introduced it and
Okay.
not adopted it, so.
Okay,
Okay,
thank you.
sure. Any other questions? If not, I would ask for a motion to adopt Resolution 81-2022.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Thank you. The motion carries. I'll take a moment here to inform everybody in the public that the cap bank ordinance and introduction of the 2022 budget has been delayed to the May 19th, 2022 session. So I sent out an email, actually asked the city clerk to send out an email today on my behalf that the budget will not be introduced this evening. We thought as of Sunday it might be introduced, but there were some questions from the auditors about the appropriations cap, and so we had to withdraw introduction of the budget. We did work through, I think, almost all of those issues, probably all the issues tonight, and we will be ready to introduce the budget at our May 19th meeting. The CFO, as of 3 or 4 days ago, was still confident that the budget would pass the auditor's scrutiny, but it did not. So that's where we find ourselves tonight. And as I say in my note, I apologize to everybody for laying out the expectation that the budget will be introduced tonight, and it's not. But we will, I think we'll be prepared to introduce it at the next meeting, and at that time I'll speak to it generally, and we'll plan some time for a secondary meeting to kind of go through the budget. My idea this year is that we have rather than have a working session in June, we take the working session and we turn it into a budget meeting, so we're not adding additional meetings to the calendar. I would like to ask some of the key department heads to show up and to speak to their budgets and to answer any questions from the public. We'll set aside 2.5 hours to really get into the budget as much as the public wishes and the council. It's also my intention to meet individually with any council member before that meeting to go through the budget, to answer any questions in advance, to make that meeting go a little bit more quickly and efficiently. So are there any questions from the council about this? No? Okay. Next on the agenda is an ordinance. It's the second reading and public hearing for ordinance number 06-2022. This is a bond ordinance which we introduced on March 17th, 2022, and it was amended on April 21st with a public hearing scheduled for May 3rd, 2022. So I will read the ordinance into the record by title. This is an ordinance to fund the USDA grant for Swan Creek and Ely Creek, all the work that's being done there by the end of August. This ordinance was amended on April 21st, 2022, and the public hearing is tonight. So this is bond ordinance number 06-2022. Bond ordinance providing for watershed protection improvements in the area of Swan Creek and Ely Creek, Upper York Street, in and by the city of Lambertville in the county of Hunterdon, New Jersey, appropriating $1,921,000 therefore, and authorizing the issuance of $476,189 in bonds or notes of the city to finance part of the cost thereof. And just as a reminder to the public and anybody who's watching from home, we amended this ordinance because it became clear after we introduced it initially that we did not need to borrow the full amount for the creek cleanup. Unlike FEMA, we are able to just borrow kind of what we need to cycle through the cash and the bills as they come due. So we did not need to borrow the full amount. In effect, we'll have about $500,000 in cash, and we expect this grant to be closed out probably by October or November. So that's why we changed it. Are there any questions from the council about this? No? Right. If there are no questions from the council, I would like to open the public hearing for ordinance number 06-2022 and ask if anybody here in the room has any comments or questions, and if no one here does, we'll see if anyone does on the online feature. Are there any members of the public who wish to speak to this ordinance? Right. I don't see anyone. Do we have anybody online, Mike?
No, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. So, having no public comment on this ordinance, I would like to ask for a motion to close the public hearing for ordinance number 06-2022.
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, that motion will carry. And this time it's appropriate for me to ask for a motion to adopt on second reading, granting final approval of ordinance number 06-2022. Is there a motion?
So
Second.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the budget, the motion will carry. The budget discussion is delayed, as I just reviewed. And now we're going to move on to discussion items. So the first thing on our list of discussion items this evening is electric charging stations. And Liz McGill-Peer is going to talk a little bit about what we talked about in our last meeting, which is that grant opportunity for the city to install some charging stations here in the city. Just before I introduce Liz, I was at one of the EV charging seminars a couple months ago, and I meant to bring just a couple statistics to the meeting last time, and I didn't do that. But I think there's some good statistics out there. In the last 5 years in New Jersey, we've increased electric vehicles from about 10,000 to about 60,000. And the state anticipates that by the year 2025, there'll be 330,000 electric vehicles in the state of New Jersey, and 2 million by the year 2035. So this is a timely question to consider. And with that, I would ask Liz to just step up to the microphone and share a little bit of information about the grant.
Mayor, council, members of the public, thank you so much for having me tonight. As you know, the DEP is offering municipalities up to $200,000 each to purchase DC fast charger stations. DEP has determined Hunterdon County to be a Tier 1 county and will be given priority, and they've also given Lambertville a sustainability score of 80 out of 100, which gives us a higher probability of being selected as well. Two great things that are in our favor. In addition to this opportunity, PSE&G has a rebate opportunities to reimburse the city for costs of the electric infrastructure. And we would like to apply for chargers that would power vehicles in EV designated spots at the Union Street parking lot to be used by residents as well as visitors. Our primary focus in choosing this location was to find a place that would draw EV owners into our central business district to patron shops and restaurants while their vehicles are charging. We are in a public EV charger desert island with no public chargers within about 10 miles. I'd like to share with you guys a screenshot from my friend's app that's attached to his electric vehicle that will show that there are no EV chargers in our area. Here's something I didn't print out a lot, you know, saving paper and everything. So he was explaining to me that when you put your destination in an electric vehicle, oftentimes it will reroute your inputted trip in order to route the car to where publicly available chargers are when your car battery gets low. So this could quite possibly bring a whole slew of additional patrons into our city who were not initially planning on coming here. The governor was in Lambertville today speaking about the importance of resiliency planning in towns like Lambertville. In addition to drawing business into the central business district, as we talk about resiliency and look to the future for how we can commit to climate change mitigation, this is a way that we can highlight Lambertville's values by providing convenient accommodations for visitors who have invested in that technology. After discussion with Councilman Stegman about his no vote and thoughtful consideration about the grant requirements, I asked the council to amend Resolution 72-2022 to either one charging station that can power 2 spots at this location, or 2 charging stations that can each power only 1 spot at the Union Street lot, and support this application to DEP unanimously. Thank you.
Council, are there questions for Liz?
Can you repeat the last? Thank you so much for
Yeah.
coming forward. So it's either way, it's 2 spots. It's
Only
whether,
2 spots.
Whether you can split them up, or is it less expensive if we do a twin and just do?
I think it depends on the brand of charger you get and the type of charger you get, whether it would be more expensive or less. But DEP does reimburse municipalities who are putting these chargers on public property for up to 100% of the cost of the charger. So either way, it's free to us.
Yeah, my concern was, well, thank you for amending your request to only repurposing 2 spots instead of 4 spots, basically, right? So we move closer to just having 2 spots for whether they're side by side or placed apart from each other. My other concern was about the placement. Have you been able to find out any other information about putting these in a different location than proposed?
Cindy has an email out to PSE&G to find out the cost of moving it from the back of that lot to the front of the lot. But when the engineer was here, she said that it was possible to put it in the front of the lot. She just recommended that we put it in the back of the lot because it would be cheaper. But now that we have found out that PSE&G has opportunities for reimbursement for those costs, then it is quite likely that either way, we're not going to be paying for it.
Okay. Well, I would like to see them in the front of the lot, so we get some visual acknowledgement from people walking on the sidewalks that Lambertville is the progressive city, both environmentally as well, and it just sends that message out rather than have them in the back where they're not visible. So I don't know. I'm fine with the spots being side by side. I think it sends a stronger message out that we, that we're stepping or into the future in a positive way to be an environmentally friendly city. And thank you for your work on addressing my concerns about it.
I wanted to, you mentioned a tier one. Can you just explain it with the relevance for the audience?
Sure. Tier 1 is a county that is identified by the DEP as a county that is in most need, that has the least amount of electric vehicle infrastructure.
Okay. And you said something that struck me that, think about it this way when we first started talking about this, and that was, you know, there's a limiting factor to the parking spots, and I raised this issue last week because I was a little bit concerned about what people may perceive as a loss of parking downtown, which is much coveted. You've also raised an interesting sort of counterpoint too, which is that we might be driving people, especially with this map, into town near our businesses to the extent that we have these spaces available. So while it's a limiting factor, it may shut out gas-powered vehicles. It also may draw folks in, which is what we want from our business community. I just wanted to say, since there is external funding for this, I would support 4 spots, but I will defer if we need to get a unanimous decision. 2 is fine, but given the trend of where we're headed with this, I just wanted to say for support.
I was going to say the same thing. I would rather see us go with 4 at this point, especially because it's an opportunity to get those chargers free of cost. That opportunity will not be, my assumption is it will be increasingly less likely as this becomes more of a standard expectation for municipalities to provide this. So I'm not going to vote no if it's 2, but I think we're being a little short-sighted.
So did you want to clarify the 2 spaces? I'm sorry, we
Yeah.
should have done this.
Yeah, sorry, I should have said this earlier. When I was talking about thoughtful consideration, I meant to elaborate a bit. We found out this afternoon that while we can get 4 spots, they can't be in the exact same location. So 2 spots is ideal, at the request of councilmen, but also we just found out that we can't have more than 2 at this location, but we could do 2 in an additional location. It would just have to have a paved parking lot so that we can have lines. So that's the only thing that would stop us from having a City Hall, for example. So City Hall would be, in my opinion, a great spot for another 2 chargers.
I would certainly agree with that too. It does seem
Yeah.
that it's
I think the paving part is, we paid part of that. Well, first, the lot used to be paved, number 1. Number 2 is when we put in a larger handicap accessible space, it was paved. So I wouldn't let the fact that it's a gravel space eliminate the possibility of paving in that lot.
Would the paving be recompensated for the paving? No, that would be on us.
We would have, that would be on us, and I would advocate for porous pavement if we were gonna.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
If I may
No,
use
no,
this
I-
opportunity to do
true.
so.
Share the
Thank you for
environmental.
clearing up
I
my
was thinking
mistake.
about the meeting this morning, yes, I would, yes,
Yes.
thank you.
But we don't have many other lots, we don't have many other areas to move these because of flood zones, and so the limit is, and I think that would send a really great message to anyone coming to the city that there are some behind City Hall as well.
Can I ask? Oh, go ahead.
No, just to clarify, so we're still looking at a total of 2 stations, 4 spots, right? 2 spots per station. Is
So
that
the
correct?
thing that was confusing in the DEP grant for us, that I was able to get clarification on today, was that it's not the station themselves, it's the ports. So the ports that come out of the station that plug into the car. So if you have one station that can plug into 2 spots, that's your 2 charging spaces. And they only allow you to have 2 charging spaces, whether it's 2 EV chargers with 1 port each charging those 2 spots, or if it's a single charging station with 2 ports.
So charging 2 vehicles concurrently?
That's right.
Okay. And so, I'm not clear, so originally we talked about a total of 2 charging stations and 4 spots?
Yes.
Okay, would we still be looking at that, schematic, or would we just be saying, get 1 charging station, put it on the North Union Street lot with 2 spots, and not get a second one? I mean, I would support getting a second one. I think, in agreement with Council President and Councilman Sanders, that let's grab it while the money's there.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And if we could, the application is due on the 13th. So if there was agreement tonight that in addition to the 2 spots at the Union Street lot, that we would put another 2 spots somewhere else, then we can certainly apply for that.
Does it, on the latter of the 2, do you have to identify the 2 spots as we did in the first?
Yeah.
Specific spots or general locations?
They
like-
say location is the language that's used. Location is the language that's used.
All right.
Can't you just say Lambertville?
Wouldn't that be great?
And is it possible to do 2 spaces on a street?
I haven't read anything that says that we couldn't do 2 spaces on a street. It says that they have to be lined. I have the grant requirements here. They have to be lined. They have to have, I think they call them bolsters, like the concrete, like the round concrete barriers in front of them to stop from snow plows. Let's see.
Were you thinking of a specific?
No,
specific spot?
no, I'm just asking generally, I mean,
This house,
no.
go put one on Cottage Hill.
We have a lot of flexibility behind City Hall too. You know, and we also have no parking during certain hours on the street where people who are doing business in City Hall can pull up and park. But we have flexibility to perhaps redo some of where the city parks, allowing to maintain employee parking for City Hall, but not necessarily all in the back of the building.
So it says each charging station must be located at a parking space that is designated for electric vehicles only and marked with appropriate signage and floor paint outlining the parking spots.
So conceivably, we could do 2 spaces at City Hall if we just paved 2 spaces at the end of the lot, for example.
Yes.
So it sounds like, for the moment, we have a little bit of time until it's due. We voted last time to move ahead with 4 spots total. So it seems like that vote could stand. We take a little bit of time to see if we can find a suitable spot for those other 2.
You know, I think that my understanding was that Liz would like a unanimous support of this resolution, that we would have to amend it tonight in order to do all the work that's required, because it's a 20-hour grant writing process. It's a great deal of work. So, you know, I think the question is before us tonight, because we're not meeting again before the grant would be due, before the grant application is due, is would the council consider doing 2 spaces, 4 spaces?
Oh, we can't do 4, we're the same
No,
location.
well, if we specified City Hall,
Oh, gotcha.
right?
Yeah.
And then, yeah, Bill, I'm sorry, do you want?
Mayor, I think there's an issue with paving the
Okay.
parking lot at City Hall.
Okay,
Based on some DEP requirements, we can look further into that, but
got it.
I think that's a concern.
Okay.
I think that we might not be able to.
Correct.
So we would need to,
Fine
we would
with
need
that.
to be able to stipulate where that second location would be.
Yeah.
Right.
Right, we're not gonna be able
To go into the grant.
How,
Yeah.
to your point, how long does that take to get a response on?
I have to get some more information. I don't have the answer right now, but we can review.
So, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to speak over you. So Liz,
Oh, I'm sorry.
was there a list of potential locations where, you know, like a spreadsheet where we said, okay, this location could do this and this, it's good, it has all these criteria, here are the criteria, here are the locations, yes, no, no, you know, did you deal with like a decision chart or anything like that? So we should be able to work from that to find the second location. What's your confidence level on that?
Yeah, so my greatest confidence was in the Union Street lot. We didn't want to put, the other lots we considered, we didn't want to put anything here because of flooding. We didn't want to put expensive infrastructure where it would flood. And the Clausen property was a consideration, but they do have only a few limited spots for Fisherman's Mark there, which was a kind of a similar consideration when we thought about the library. Because as another paved lot, we thought that with limited parking there for just the library, I mean, obviously other people use it, but we didn't want to detract from that.
Did the Cavallo?
Cavallo, is that what you said?
Is Cavallo paved?
It is,
Yes.
but it's on the street.
What's that?
It's on the street, Cavallo Park,
It's
parking
street
on Mount Hope
parking.
Street, yeah, so that was one of the reasons, because the city has to own the lot. right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, if it's something that we could consider, it might draw people into.
Okay, so it has to be a city-owned lot.
And
City-owned
then
property.
the street's
City-owned
out
property.
of the mix in that case. The city doesn't, it depends on where the city's property lines go to, whether we can do that in the street alongside City Hall. That's an option. I have one question for you about, it doesn't, my understanding, and I know you've done so much work and I really appreciate what you've done. The issue is maintaining the delineation of the spot. There is not a reason why we couldn't do that on the gravel by doing something to delineate the parking spot.
Yes, I was going to bring that point up. So it doesn't say that it has to be paved. The language says each charging station must be located at a parking space that is designated for electric vehicles only and marked with appropriate signage and floor paint outlining the parking spots.
Right, so we could do a version of that, and it doesn't take paving anything in there by delineating that.
Floor paint.
Hmm?
It says floor paint.
Floor paint?
Floor paint is the language.
What is it? F-O-R paint or floor?
Floor,
The
like
thing
ground.
marking the marking on the ground.
Yeah.
All right, so we do floor paint. But we could put, do you mean, no, I'll just go one more level. Do you mean that they mean that the entire space under it, like the handicap parking, has to be painted?
It doesn't say anything about that.
So it just wants it,
They
floor
just
paint.
want it to be very clear where the spots are.
so we could delineate the spaces using curbs, like those curbs that stop you driving off the parking lot, vertically or horizontally, diagonally or what, and paint them. I mean, it's pretty vague about what we can and can't do. But it has to be painted with floor paint. So I think if you run this by them or show, I wouldn't rule it out because it's got to be painted, because you could paint it.
Okay.
Well, they also want these things to happen, so they have an incentive to work with us
Yeah.
to make it.
And
Yeah.
the grant's from DEP, and it's probably a DEP rule that prohibits the paving too, right?
Well, it depends on what we improve. People put in driveways here every week, and once they come in front of the planning board, we just make sure they're not impervious surfaces.
Well, I guess we need some advice as to what we
Yeah.
can do before.
So I think given the testimony that it's a workaround that we can probably handle somewhat.
I would just like to ask one question that you may or may not have the answer to. If we apply for 4 spaces and 2 are at City Hall, and it turns out that is not deemed a suitable site, we don't lose the other grant. I mean, we don't lose the whole kit and caboodle.
That's right. It would be it has to be 2 separate.
Two separate grants.
So that'll,
Okay.
Oh, I see.
Right.
But see, I'm gonna make sure you're answering the question. So if I understood your question, was if one of the sites is deemed inappropriate, do we lose the ability to get the grant for the one that is appropriate?
The way that, that we have to do it, I believe, is that we have to apply two separate applications
Oh, I see,
for each one. I don't believe that there are, and Cindy, you can correct me if I'm wrong, I don't believe that it's all in one,
I'm not sure about that, Liz, to be honest with you.
yeah.
All right, it sounds like we have some consensus here on the council. It sounds to me.
Excuse me, Mayor,
oh,
I just want
sorry.
to ask
Of course.
one,
Yeah, of course.
unrelated to what we've been talking about. Have you gotten any feedback from the business community, what their temperature is on, having those particular parking spaces dedicated to EV only?
Do you want to share?
Happy to. Ribbons Harris, I'm the Executive Director for the Greater Lambertville Chamber of Commerce. In general, the business community has been seeking out question as to why we haven't pursued this already. A number of individuals have even volunteered, the opportunity to enter into conversation about possibly putting it in front of their business. It's a big issue, and everyone is very excited about the possibility of this coming forward. The question is, as I understand it, and forgive me, please correct me if I don't quite have this right, but we're not just looking at 2 spots in one place, and it could go on any city property. If that is true, we have a courthouse right here with the Acme Movie Theater, we have this Lilly Library, we have a lot of other places in the community, including the school, that may be a viable option. I understand we're looking at keeping it close to the business community, but the south end of town is not necessarily serviced entirely by that northern parking lot. So it's worth consideration of that if you're looking to really take advantage of all 4 spots. And I agree with this side of the table saying that, the money is there. Let's take advantage of it now and really get ourselves in a position where we can get a foothold on this for the future.
Okay, thank you. Thanks.
Okay, so what do we need to
So-
vote on?
What's our next
So
one?
I think, Cindy, you're gonna have to help me with this. So it seems to me, one, that we are willing to amend the resolution, from what I'm hearing, so we'll vote on that, or we'll talk about that. It seems to me that there is consensus that we could apply for 2 separate grants, one for 2 spaces in the North Union parking lot. We would need to make sure that, to Councilman Stegman's concern, that we relocate that from the northeast corner to the northwest corner. So that would be closer to North Union Street, giving,
If possible.
I'm sorry?
if possible.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to give up the grant because by virtue of the fact that it couldn't be placed in the front.
We
Okay.
could say the North Union Street parking lot and not designate where the
Yeah.
spots
Okay,
are in the
good.
resolution, if that works for you.
Okay, so then we
Well,
would,
what do you mean if possible? I just want to make sure I understand.
It'd be technically, financially, if it's gonna be super expensive to move from the back to the front, then I would propose that we leave it in the back.
Well, your testimony is that there's funding coming down
Yeah,
for doing it. And I had 2 conditions to agree to this. One was we designate them in the front 2 spots, and we limit it to 2 vehicles. 1 charging station, 2 vehicles. I would support that. If possible, it's not
So you-
part of my
Councilman, you
conversation.
won't- If it, for some reason it is not feasible to move it, it's still two spots in the Union Street, you wouldn't support it if it couldn't be in the front?
I think,
You'd rather give up the funding and this opportunity?
I might.
But I think our time to decide is now, though.
Right.
Well, what are the
Well,
limiting factors that it's expensive?
Let me ask you this.
They just haven't they don't have all the answers yet, they haven't gotten all the information.
It's the electric that would be the holdup.
Yes.
Right, and it's because when she looked at the street, she used one term. When she looked at the very back of the property, coming through from the church, she used a different term. One was like a 12240, and the other one she used, that was in the back, which was the preferred for the EV charger. And then out front, she said they would have to upgrade it because it would not be able to accommodate that. She is away on vacation and not able to get back to us for this meeting. And she's the only one from JCP&L that they send out to do this type of work.
and she's
So-
already been to the lot with us, so she knows, so we're just waiting to hear back from her.
When is this
Well-
person available again?
I don't know, I just got a message that she was away on vacation, and it didn't give me a time frame.
I think it's reasonable to move this forward one way or another, this question forward tonight, given that we're not going to have a chance to meet again before the grant application is due. So,
I'm just concerned about having the finances limit our decision on where these go.
all right.
That seems to be the concern here from the council.
It's not, that's not my only concern. My concern is also the technical feasibility. And my bigger concern is potentially losing out on this opportunity because of 40 feet in a parking lot.
I'm not clear why the location is northeast, northwest, why that's so critical, given that we've heard from the, representative of the business community that they're very excited to see this move forward. It seems like we'd be collaborating and working with them regardless of east or west, part of the spot, or the lot, rather. But I agree, I think we should move forward with a non-specified location to be duked out another day.
I would agree, and I think that it's also possible to put a big fat sign in front of the parking lot that says, 2 big EV charging stations at the back of the lot. So for me, this is a clear question of moving into the future, and obviously I think that I think your point is great. I think it would be great to have that visibility, but I also think that we can affect it with other ways. And I would hate to lose the grant because of, as you say, 40 feet. So,
Well, we could add something in that if possible, I'll go, if possible, preferably in the first 2 spots. And I'll be fine with it. I don't want to stop the project. The regulations that you brought forward were very helpful, because my objection was having 4 spots repurposed in that lot without a very rigorous outreach to the business community first, and that was also my concern last week. And since that time, you've answered my questions, and the council supported. So and I've always been happy to approve it. I was just concerned about process and numbers. And the grant itself helped, answer one of the questions that would have been a moot point last week, because it would have just been 2 spots.
Yeah.
So I will support this. Thank you.
thank you, Councilman. And is the council in favor of adding a separate application for 2 spots at City Hall?
If it has to be, it may be able to be in one application.
No, she just says 2 different ones.
I said I believe so, but I will find out.
Well, if you could dig a little bit deeper, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Well, yeah, I'm just saying,
Dig a
whatever,
little
we just want to resolve in a way that it allows the process to move ahead without coming back to us.
Well, and also that
Well, yeah.
if one application has 2 locations and they don't approve the other one, I think to Ward's point, we don't want to lose the whole project.
That's right.
So
So we
whichever way that works.
We would amend the resolution that says either 1 charging station that charges 2 vehicles, or 2 chargers that each, right? 2 that does 1 each.
Correct.
For a total of 4 in either,
Yes.
with 2 of them in City Hall and 2 of them in the North Union Street parking lot, with the preference being in the northwest corner if possible.
Can we just leave out the whole corner business?
No, Councilman Stegman would like to leave it in.
Oh, I'm sorry, I missed that part.
And it's if possible, it doesn't,
Yeah.
right?
I just don't want to get lost in the weeds of this conversation, that we're all very supportive of this, and we're very appreciative of all of your work and your colleagues' work. So just, while this is an important part of this, but I don't want us to get lost on the minutiae here of this, that we're really appreciative of your work and the opportunity, and it'd be great for the city to get these.
Yeah, I agree with Councilman Sanders. I think this has been really important information. The only feedback I would give is just for process. It would have been great to have had this really robust discussion prior to the first resolution, so we could have just moved on, you know what I mean? So I think it's an opportunity for future.
Point taken. Any other comments before I ask for a motion to adopt the resolution as amended? No? So,
I was gonna make the motion.
Made, okay. Councilman Sanders makes a motion to adopt the resolution as.
Second.
Thank you, Councilman Sigmund. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Thank you very much, Liz, for your hard work and
Thank you.
dedication to this project and all of the other work. And wait, aren't you the famous Miss, what is it? I forget. Tell me.
Oh, that'll be a surprise, that we can share
Oh.
next month.
Oh, gosh, okay, sorry.
That's okay.
Anyway, thank you. I didn't realize that was, all right. Thank you for your work.
Yes,
Much
thank you.
appreciated.
And this is a very
Okay.
complicated grant, and so it took a lot for her to sort through this and to digest it, and a lot of research, and she talked to a lot of people, so really, really appreciate that.
Thank
And
you.
just on a side note, I'd like to say, while I've got the floor here, and while we're talking about Liz, that Liz has joined our New Jersey Accelerator, what's the next word? Resilience team, yeah, and that is very important work, and I've already talked a little bit about that. But Liz has joined the team, and we have a road trip on Monday. We go out for like some 8 hours, 7 hours program for that. So thank you for that as well,
If I
Liz.
could say something about, in all the conversations I've had with Liz, very upbeat and positive and working to figure out a way to make this work. And I thank the mayor for allowing us to have this conversation and come to a consensus and to all support your applications, I think. Thank the council, mayor and council, and you as well.
All right, moving on to letter B, boards and commissions. We have a few vacancies on a couple of boards and commissions, and I just wanted to get this out there into the public in case anybody is interested in submitting a letter of interest to me with a resume, or to Cindy. So currently we have one position available on Parks and Recreation. The Shade Tree Commission has 2 positions available, and the Zoning Board of Adjustment has 1 position available. So if you know of anybody who's interested in such a position, feel free to give me a call, and I'm happy to discuss what the work entails, and we'll move forward with that. Any questions about any of that? Okay. Letter number C, newspaper boxes. So this is something I've talked with some people from the business community about. Let's see, we've received some complaints from the public regarding the newspaper boxes in our community, and we're going to be potentially looking at a sample or at an ordinance. Cindy, I didn't actually see that ordinance. Did you send it through?
Okay. It's in the folder.
All right.
What was the concern?
Well, we have a multitude of these, these boxes on the bridges and in the streets. There's one right on the corner of North Union and Bridge, and it's sort of, kind of blocking the way a little bit. And so some of these boxes that have free maps and newspapers and that kind of thing, they, to my mind, they're unsightly and they're not kept stocked, and it just seems like a lot of them. And, I view them as an eyesore and a bit of a, safety concern, quite honestly, because there's so many of them, certainly down on the bridge. So this was just something that came to our attention before Shadfest, when we were looking to kind of really tidy up the central business district, flowers and do all kinds of other things, and it was something that the chamber, in particular the beautification committee, remarked on to me, and I went down and looked at them, and a lot of them are empty, and a lot of them are, stained, and they're just kind of gross.
So, have we been able to check with the lead municipalities to see if there's any community that approached dealing with these cans? Because
There's a draft ordinance, or draft resolution in
It's
the
from
folder.
Perth Amboy.
From Perth draft resolution in the folder from Perth Amboy.
and did it work for them?
I might ask Bill to speak on this, if you don't mind, Bill, just for a minute.
It was adopted in February. The implementation of the regulations hasn't started yet. They gave the news box owners, I think, 60 or 90 days to comply and meet all the registration requirements. So it's still a work in progress. We'll see if it works, but there are the regulations that you saw are what will be going into effect pretty shortly.
So if the owners don't comply, the city just yanks them out and jumps
Hold
them?
them, I mean, they're private
They're-
property,
They're
so
someone else's property.
there's a process that's set forth, but yeah, pretty simply, they're required to be maintained.
I'm curious to know how successful it's going to be, because given people's, society's move away from printed material, they may not, the reason they're empty is because nobody's making that investment in printed material to put in it, so, I don't know what kind of incentive there is to have it, have people, I mean, I think we need to clean them up, don't get me wrong, but I'm just thinking from, if I was the guy that owned it, I'd be like, yeah, do me a favor and get rid of it, so, yeah.
Well, last time we tried, thank you for that, and I didn't look at the folder before I came. The memory serves correctly, we had tried to address this once before, and it was a freedom of speech.
Well, I think you can't regulate the content, so we couldn't say, we don't want the,
Girly stuff.
well, just there's something like the Democratic or Republican newspaper thing. It'd be hard to regulate content, I think.
And we took that into consideration in the draft that you have, like, there's no content regulation, it's more of just a,
I sort of do.
It's a PR.
public welfare.
It's the container, not what's in the container.
Right, and it'll be interesting to see what happens for Amber. I mean, I do think that, this is a project, right? I mean, I think it's one of those kind of quality of life things in some ways. But on the other hand, it's somebody's got to keep track of these and see if they're filled and contact the owners and say, this hasn't been filled and it needs to be painted. So, it's just wanted to get it out there a little bit on our radar to consider. I don't have a strong feeling about it one way or another, especially if it's going to just require a ton of extra work that we don't really have the bandwidth for. But I thought it was well worth at least bringing up to the council and having another conversation on, because there really are a lot of them, and I do personally find them annoying.
Yeah, they are unsightly, but I'd be a little tempted to wait to see how the implementation goes from Perth Amboy and any other municipalities in New Jersey that have done this, to see what that process looks like and to see whether the juice is like the squeeze.
That sounds idea. Bill, when was this passed in Perth Amboy recently?
went into effect the end of February, so I can check and get some information to see if there's anything.
Yeah, I'll call Perth Amboy and find out, see whether it's.
I think it's great to do just to approach it that way rather than go through a process that will be potentially challenged in court, and why should we? If they're proceeding with it, I think that's probably the bellwether of what we should do going forward. I don't disagree with all the comments, because living here, as we all do, we just tunnel vision away. And I was really glad to see Public Works before Shad Festival moving them and cleaning of them, which should be, I think, the responsibility of the people who put them there. So we'll see what happens.
So I'll put you in charge of contacting them.
Yeah.
The location right now is, there's some on the bridge by the Lambertville station.
Right.
And there used to be some by the Christmas tree. They're still there.
They're still
Yeah, there are.
Are there any other places in town?
There's one on the corner bridge in North Union, and we did shift a couple over the bridge they were very heavily weighted on the south side of the bridge, and we moved a few to the north side of the canal bridge just to distribute them a little bit more, before Shad Fest.
There have been some mysterious relocations of them in the past, I must say.
All right.
Mysterious though they may be.
All right, so I will follow up with the council within the next 3 or 4 months. I'll just check in with Perth Amboy and see how it's going for them, and we can continue this discussion if we feel like we want to. So thank you for that. Next item is, we're looking at, some of the things that we like to do in these working sessions is really just kind of bat around ideas, whether it's about newspaper boxes or potential changes to city policies. In this case, we're now moving on to considering some policy or some changes to things like the meter fees, food license fees, annual food licenses, and county inspection fees. So we'll just take these one by one. I asked Cindy to generate a memorandum for the council. Again, I don't have a specific I'm more interested in a conversation about these things tonight than I am about pushing it forward any specific agenda that I quite frankly don't have, but I think it's good to have a conversation on some of these matters. So the first thing that I asked Cindy to look into were meter fees, and the memorandum was generated. So I don't know, Cindy, do you want to speak to kind of a little bit about what I asked you to do and kind of where we are and what you think is an
So,
important highlight?
You know, out of Hunterdon County, I think Lambertville is the only one. Mike actually helped me with this, so Mike, feel free to jump in. But I think Lambertville's the only one with meters. Somerset County it goes to, it's kind of far away. New Hope has meters. They're not in our county, but they are right across the street and kind of our competitor. Princeton is the other one. So we did look at all
Wait,
three
New Hope
areas.
has I thought they had kiosks.
They have kiosks, yes. They had meters, they went to kiosks. Yeah. Which, for a long time, kiosks were not viable because we're kind of in an area where it's tree covered, and whenever you talk to people like from Princeton and they talked about kiosks, they often failed because they didn't get a good signal. But that's no longer the case. So kiosks seem to be working. So anyway, in looking at all of that, New Hope is charging $2 per hour. And Princeton charges 55 cents for 15 minutes, $1 for 30 minutes, and $1.75 per hour for 3-hour meters. Princeton is kind of like all over the place because they have all-day meters, they have 3-hour meters, they have Princeton Station, and they have the omnibus parking, which is $20 per hour. They have Spring Street, and then interestingly enough, on holidays, they just charge a different rate, they don't do it for free. So the last time the city increased our meters, we went from $1 to $1.25. That was in 2019. And so all we really did was try to lay this out so you would have a discussion point and some place to begin. Do you want me to do them one at a time, have that discussion, and then talk about licensing fees?
Yeah, no, let's take them one at a time. And let's remember this is just a discussion and we don't necessarily have to spend a great deal of time on it, but it's really just to kind of take the temperature of what the council's thinking. And I apologize to the council. I did not really have time to speak to everybody, which is my usual custom. I try to reach out to all the council members before the meetings to touch base with them about the agenda, and I did not do that. So I'm headed into this conversation almost completely blind in terms of what people might be thinking, but nonetheless, I think I think we have a place to start. So, I don't know if anybody wants to begin on this discussion. I will just note that obviously everybody saw my letter today, and the cap appropriations is a problem here in the city, and I'm not going to discuss the budget too much, but we know that we've had a tough budget year. I decided this evening, for example, to forego my own personal stipend for $8,000 because our budget's just so severe. Well, that's next year, if things go well. So, this is a conversation about a revenue source, potentially increasing a revenue source, and I would just like to remind everybody that things have to get paid for, regardless of things have to get paid for one way or another. So, if you just. Let me just finish up. So, in consideration for, being mindful about property taxes, I think that it's well worth looking at other potential sources of revenue, of increasing them or whatever. And this is just something that, that seems like, given New Hope is doing it for $2 an hour, would we consider, raising it some percentage, for example. So anyway, Councilman Stegman, I know that you have some thoughts on this.
Yeah, and I couldn't find this, but do we have an ordinance that delineates what the meters are for? That was
It's
quoted.
actually not in the ordinance. I believe you're talking about state law.
Can you clarify?
Oh, it is that meters should not be considered a revenue producer. They should be, their purpose is to turn over spaces.
Correct.
So.
I'm happy to amend my language to reflect that state. I'm dying to turn over spaces. Let's keep it moving. So I'm happy to reflect that change. But the hard truth of it is, it's a critical source of revenue for the city. I don't remember how much we brought in, but it's hundreds of thousands of dollars.
So I think the meters bring in some, between 300 and 360,000 or
Yep.
somewhere in there. I just want to remind us, and it's maybe a question for Bill, I don't know if it's a question for today, but there was a thought to do meters on Sunday mornings. There was a large pushback a couple of years ago. We did receive a letter from an attorney for the church that raised the issue of the purpose for which this is being sought. And the language around council had been about revenue raising. His point of the letter, and I don't know if it's accurate or not, was that to your point, Council President or Councilman Stegan, is that the purpose has to be for compensation of running the services rather than a external taxing mechanism. So I think we need to be careful about what we're saying about this, but also what the reality is like how much does it cost to service the meters and replace the meters and the batteries for the meters and the meter person who goes around and collects the money and so forth. I think if that's relevant, then that should be part of our analysis moving forward are we paying for the meters, the cost of the meters now?
Well, and the other concern is the age of the meters. The guts are actually, we have to replace them frequently. And so far this year, we have spent $414 in parts alone. So it's that coin thing that the police department now does.
I noticed that, I occasionally bump into them and run up money in the meters and notice that they're broken. But I think we would probably need to look at what the expected revenue from whatever it is we're anticipating to increase it, what's that extra revenue, and is it rationally related to the cost of fixing expenses?
So we're saying,
If it's a relevant consideration.
so you're saying that the monies generated through the meters can only be used for maintaining the parking
I'm saying I don't know
function of the city?
I don't know the answer to that question, but it was raised when we considered raising this a couple of years ago by an attorney representing churches.
Bill?
So as the councilman said, it can't be considered a tax, and there's a way it has to be approached, and I'm going to be careful with what I say. I'd rather look at this a little bit further to make some more clarifications, but essentially, it can't be seen as a tax. It is general revenue to the city, but we have to be cognizant of the operation costs for running the city's parking system, and any fee increases have to be tied to the additional cost. And as you're going to see in the budget, costs are going up for whether it's replacing parts. There's going to be additional expenses, so that's also a consideration when reviewing proposed increases in prices. But it should be tied to maintenance of the meters, collections, things like that.
And can it be tied to the potential replacement of meters altogether to a new system?
Some expenses related to that, yeah, I think so. And I'd be glad to put some more specifics together.
And according to what Cindy had provided us with, she gave us 3 years of maintenance, how much it's cost the city. And I believe this year it's gone up much more than in the past 2 years.
So in 2020, we paid $668 in parts, $396 in batteries. 2021, we paid $915 in parts, $251 in batteries. Now keep in mind, this does not include the time that whoever at the police department invests in this. We're paying somebody to fix these. And this year so far, and that would be January, February, March, and I believe April, it includes $414 in parts and $299 in batteries. And the concern that I have is that these meters we purchased in 2011, but they were refurbished, so they weren't new. and they're digital. So, you know, you replace the battery frequently, we're replacing the coin, coin chute a lot, and the fear that I have is that we're going to get to a point where we're not going to be able to order new coin chutes, and that the batteries in some of the meters go much quickly than in others, and, you know, so, and then I think sometimes there's a timing issue,
They
right?
have to be calibrated as
Yeah.
well.
Right, and that's not included in here, so,
So,
and I was just gonna say, I think that's the analysis that we would need, the projections that we need to see to make a thoughtful consideration of this issue. And I don't see it here yet. You know, yeah, I think there's additional background would be necessary for us to consider this.
Okay, I'm happy to hold off, table this until we have.
Yeah.
And one other point is, when these meters, when in fact that there are these serviced by, they're Duncan meters that were redone, correct? The
they
last
are, I
time?
believe they are Duncan.
So I think it would be worth our while to contact Duncan, and besides making yo-yos, they would be able to give us insight on what we can expect going forward as far as being able to still service these. Because they were rebuilt so that we know that the shells are old and the insides are old. These are 10 years old, maybe? 20 years old?
2011.
Yeah, so we've gotten a lot of great use out of them, but it would be good part of the equation to figure out where this company is as far as replacement parts.
Okay, is there somebody on the council who would be willing to undertake that project?
Sure.
Make some calls?
I'd be happy to do it.
That'd be great.
Since I was so vocal about it, I think I should stand up to my responsibility as a councilman who has great concerns about raising the meters to $2 an hour. I will see, which was a recommendation that I did not accept. So let's dig back down and see where it takes us and how we can implement with the input from the business community what works for everybody.
If I could also make a second recommendation, not to burden you with additional work, but if folks have thoughts about what we should be looking at as we consider this, if we could, you know, send that to you, maybe just so you have it. You know, your point about checking to see if replacement parts are available is a really good point, but if there's other things that folks have.
Well, I'm an old plumber, and we always had to make sure there's old faucets we could fix. And just a little bit of historical fact is when we went to Park Mobile, I think you headed the research of finding out which company was the most responsive and economical. And that didn't cost us any money to do because Ward did it. So I appreciate all the work that the deputy clerk and the city clerk have been done. Let's look at it, let's get as much information we can. And I recall that when I was out of office, when the meters were last raised, the mayor wanted to raise it to $1.50. Correct me if I'm wrong. And then there was a great conversation back and forth. And I said, well, why don't we compromise and do it $1.25? Because the budget was still flexible at that time, that money could be shifted around. And the mayor, and that's what we did. We came up to a compromise. So I know that spirit is still alive in this council, and we'll get as much information as we can. And as you said, let's get ideas. Let's get ideas from people.
Just two comments I would have. One is, there's always a discussion of what is the shortest increment of time people can buy. I'm a proponent of reasonably high parking fees for all sorts of reasons we don't need to get into, but I think smaller increments is better because it gives people more choice. So like I would not want to see us go to minimum an hour, minimum 2 or 3 hours. I want us to stay in our CBD with minimum 30 minutes, which I really appreciate as a consumer. The other one thing I would ask you to look at, I'm happy to talk with you more offline. I think it's a standard thing. We like to say that higher parking fees equate with lower XYZ, whatever your business concern is. I'd like to actually have some numbers behind that to see that it's actually true. We have lots of competitor towns that have much higher parking rates, and they seem to be doing fine. So let's not just assume that that's the case. Let's put numbers to that point as well.
Well, I would ask the city to help in that aspect. So we'll talk, we'll figure something out.
And just one other note, we got in the mail today from Park Mobile, they're increasing their fees by 10 cents an hour.
Well, I think that should be reflected in, we should have the latitude to not even have to think twice about using this in a new calibration and of an increase that it's costing us, correct, Cindy? It's not costing the user.
Correct.
Okay, so that's another,
I was going to ask about this question. I thought we had a pass-through kind of concept with Park Mobile and the fee. So when I read this, I thought that the pass-through would.
I think that it's got to be our contract, right? That they're raising their fees by 10 cents an hour, but I think that pass-through is, I don't think that goes to the consumer because that rate is set by ordinance.
Okay.
So the user fees that are the pass-through is the fees to use
The
the
old
credit
fee.
card.
Okay. Oh, that's
Right.
credit card. Okay.
Correct. But the ordinance is what establishes the hourly rate.
so I'm not quite clear. So this 10 cents is, and it's only a dime, and I don't mean to belittle the fact that there's an additional fee. It does not get passed through to the consumer using it. It gets charged to us.
That's my understanding, yes.
We should look at that, but it's, if so, it's either increase to consumers or it's going to be a reduction in our revenue.
So, I mean, their letter, I gave you all a copy,
Yeah,
it's very
sure.
vague. But that's the way I took it. I was not able to get Mr. Stewart on the phone today.
So at this point, we don't know if it's a pass-through or not, so when we get more information, we'll be able to
I
make a
don't
better
believe that that could be a pass-through
Yeah,
to the
I understand your
consumer.
point, because it's in the order, the amount is in the
Correct.
ordinance, so
I don't know how is going to play out.
and regardless of what we find out, and I'm happy to do this, and I'm happy to work with the business community, is that, I'm not in favor of a huge increase. I think we have to look at the big picture, and if we're going to increase X amount one year, I think we should plan ahead and look at our expenses, and then and spread that increase out over a certain period of time, so everybody gets a chance to see, to get real, as you said, Mayor, to get real life information back on how and if it's affecting their businesses.
I agree with you.
Yeah.
I think incremental change is, I've said it many times, often the best approach in governance and in life. So I'd be more than happy to consider, that $2 was just, was one end of the spectrum, right? So there we have it. And I thank you in advance for your volunteering to undertake this project. And I'll circle back, and I'm happy to meet with you and the business community to be a part of this conversation. So, thank you.
And I'm sure the business community would welcome your participation.
I hope they will. All right, I think we're done talking about that, so let's move on to.
Did we get a chance to talk about parking?
No,
No?
Public comment.
we will have a public comment period at the
Okay.
end of the meeting. It's listed in the agenda, so
Okay.
if you can bear with us until we get there, I'd appreciate it. The next item is food license fees. So I'm going to ask Cindy to talk a little bit about these and how they've changed and what we might consider moving forward with in terms of conversation.
So currently, there are several different categories, and I provided you with the county's Board of Health's memorandum that outlined some of these fees. But we charge for a category 1, which is newsstands, pharmacies, liquor stores, $125. The county is charging an inspection fee of $100. So right now, we currently keep 25, which doesn't even cover really an hour of somebody's time, and doesn't include any type of fees that we pay to SDL. Category 3 are all other food establishments, and in 2017, we combined over 50 and under 50 seats to one fee of $250. But again, the county inspection fee is $200, and that's $200 per inspection. So, they come in the spring, they come in the fall, you know, to inspect. So we're really not even covering our fees on that.
I have a question. You mind if I interrupt you for a second?
No,
Does that mean we're getting billed by the county
Yeah.
for almost as much as we're charging, and
Correct.
sometimes less than what we're charging for the
Sometimes-
license?
sometimes more.
Sometimes more.
Right.
So
Yeah,
this is,
sometimes more,
this is
so.
a per inspection fee.
Yeah.
So if somebody maybe gets a satisfactory, then, you know, they've got to go back. So we're paying 200 a pop
Right,
for them,
right.
you know, to go back.
Okay.
So we're really not covering our fees. They don't charge for nonprofits. They said that they don't charge for temporary, but I think we get bills for temporary. So we're going to look further into that. So with having that said, we were suggesting that category 1, again, which is newsstands, pharmacies, liquor stores, be raised from $125 to $150. Category 3, we currently charge $250. I think maybe we gotta go back to the old thing from 2017. And, you know, less than 50 seats, come up with a fee to charge, and then more than 50 seats. I recommended to propose to change everything to $350, but, you know, we could work on that as well. The late fee, right now we charge $50. I have not currently experienced any problems with restaurants not registering on time. However, I did have a very bad experience with one restaurant. I want to say it had to be 2019, and I was in court with him frequently because he refused to register. And so then getting that fee, I mean, you know, I don't feel like, as a licensing person, I need to chase somebody down, go and see them in the store after 5, 6 phone calls and many, many emails. But I think every once in a while, we're probably going to have that happen. There are bad actors everywhere, do you know? I love our restaurants. No one currently is in that situation, but I have had a bad experience. I don't feel raising that from $50 to $75 for a late fee, and that would be after September 1. Licensing period begins June 1st. So we're giving them the summer to catch up. You know, I don't feel like that is harsh. And then temporary food establishments, currently for 1 to 3 days, it's $95. We were proposing we just increment that to $100. We never really have anything for 4 or more days. So it's $145 currently. And the other thing that we wanted to note here was we pay $1,700 to SDL for their licensing application. So that's, I think currently I have 60 restaurants or licensed facilities, so it would be 1,700, you know, divided by 60. I mean, that comes into play as well as Mike's time and my time when we have to try and corral everybody.
Could you describe that? Because I was confused, but it's the city pays $1,700, it's the word per that's throwing me
Yeah.
off, per license fees to use this.
Yes, so with SDL, you have their module, right? So then construction's 1,700. Food license 1,700. Each license.
module is-
Each module.
Right.
Per year.
Yeah.
It's annual licensing fee. I think it would be helpful to see, much as Councilman Sanders asked for the analysis on the parking, to see a similar type of analysis for these fees, you know, what's all involved? Like, what are the itemized, you know, what are the pieces that contribute to the city's costs, okay? And where we think that comes in. And, you know, maybe even to the point to say, like, how much resource, you know, percentage of a resource on average it takes to, you know, handle these requests. And then that way, I think it's a good way to demonstrate to everyone, to us and the public, that we're not just throwing a dart against a bulletin board and hitting a number, but there's a rationale for why we're choosing this number, and, you know, because sometimes people go, oh my God, you're raising the fees, but there's all that hidden stuff that you just talked about, like there's people's time, and there's follow-up, and there's other agencies, and there's county fees, and there's a blah, 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 blah. It's really helpful for people to kind of see that in black and white and understand why we're making this choice. And I think that also kind of retroactively applies to the parking meter discussion as well. You know, to have people understand, this is what's involved, this is what we have to do. You know, we have to look at replacing hardware, we have, you know, maintenance and total cost of ownership and the whole thing, and the person paying the person to clean it out and fix it and empty it. So I think those kinds of analyses are really helpful for everyone to have.
And Mayor, if it's, if you think it's a good idea, it's maybe a question for Bill again too, is, you know, if this isn't a taxing authority, it's a police authority, you know, do we have the same responsibilities to do this kind of analysis? I think the answer is yes, but I don't know.
Bill, do you have a thought on that?
I think in cases where the city is making up the difference, so to speak, to the county, I think that's an issue that has to be further explored. It's probably more of a finance question. I don't think, you know, this isn't department-based. I mean, it comes out of the clerk's office, obviously, but what should be considered is that this money does, to some extent, go to the general fund. This isn't targeted, but also, as I said before with the parking, and I'll be more specific in the future, but you know, cognizant of the fact that the sole purpose of this isn't to raise revenue, because that's an effect of this, but purpose is to mostly cover the expenses, not only what the city has to pay to the county, but also for the legwork that the city employees have to do to you know, review and prepare these applications.
So it seems to me, if I may, that we just need to flesh this out a little bit more, Cindy, right? I mean, if we look at just category one, you know, the county inspection fee is $100, and we just need to kind of quantify your time a little bit, right? And to do that effectively to show the value that we are offering with this service. So.
And Bill, is it possible, if I do end up going to court, that we can recover those court fees? Because court is always at night, and that eats into my personal time. And the last time I went to court, I had 4 different appearances in the evening and sat there for several hours until the case was called.
In general, you probably wouldn't be able to recover those fees from the license. There's not a fee shift.
So we couldn't like put that into the ordinance?
I'll confirm, I don't think so.
Okay,
Yeah.
thanks.
So can I just ask, are we comfortable with having Cindy kind of flesh these out a little bit and coming back to us?
Yeah, I was gonna thank Cindy and Michael, because I'm sure you were involved with some of this research, because in figuring out how much it is costing the city to do the county's work, basically, right, sir?
No, I mean, the county goes out and they do a very thorough inspection, and they have to. I mean, they're testing, you know, the refrigerators and all of that. So we're not really doing the county's work. We're making sure that people are licensed, and we have some very good places in town. So I don't want to mix that up with that one very bad experience, but it takes one to just, you know, make you second guess.
In a case like that, I didn't know that happened, by the way. Isn't the recourse to pull their license and shut them down if they won't do it?
Can't. Once you license them, that's what I learned. I had to go to court, and, you know, the judge kept giving him extensions, and then sometimes he didn't show up, and eventually he went out of business.
So you scared him out of business,
He was, yeah, that was not a very good experience, and not one that I've had before. I absolutely love our restaurants. If I call them, Mike will tell you, he hit the send button, and people were, you know, paying for their food licenses. You can't ask for anything better. So, our community is usually very good, but it just takes that one bad actor.
Yeah.
And in the whole time that we've had a late fee, he's probably the only person who has ever charged it but never paid it. Instead, we went to court.
Mm. Mhm.
Council President Taylor, did you want
I just have one simple question to make sure I understand. So the county fee, that $100 for category 1, goes directly to the county, but you process it?
Well, they bill us. So after they do their inspections, we get a bill. And then I go through the bill to make sure that they're, that it's correct.
So it's our time for processing is what we're talking about recouping.
Yeah, it's our time for processing. We process the license. They're kind of two different things, right? We do the licensing, they do the inspection. But then they bill us for that inspection. So we collect the money and then we pay the county.
And who pays the multiple county inspection fees? Are they absorbed by us?
Yeah.
Are we allowed to?
What was your question, like?
Well, Cindy said that sometimes the county has to come back for multiple inspections, but we absorb that cost.
So, in other words, we're responsible for them to come back and correct a violation that
The applicant.
the applicant has, and it costs, and they bill us, and we can't pass that back?
No, not with our current ordinance, we can't.
Oh, yeah, that should be.
Yeah,
Yeah, we should definitely
Well-
look at that one.
Change it.
Yeah, I think,
That's
yeah,
only fair.
I think so. And I want to kind of pick up on what you asked Bill a minute ago about your, recovering your time for when you have to go to court. It seems to me that if we have someone an applicant who's, not filing their license, not paying their late fee, and we have to take them to court, we're not allowed to put something in our ordinance to hold the licensee accountable for those costs? I mean, that to me is just rewarding bad behavior, or enabling it, let's put it that way.
The ordinance sets forth the fines that are available.
It's gotta be X dollars.
Well, there's a range, I believe. There's a minimum and a maximum. I think it's $250 is the minimum and $1,250 or $2,000 is the maximum.
It depends on what section
Yeah.
of the ordinance book you.
I think there's a general, and then some others have higher or lower fees. But, that's usually what judges base their fine on, not.
So we're recovering some of that, but just not like someone's time, right? Not our resources' time, sitting for hours in court on multiple occasions. That's what you're saying. I'm not clear what we're not recovering, what's not recoverable.
So in that particular case, the first time I went, he was a no-show.
Mhm.
Second time I went, the judge was kind of trying to give him some time. So he was given 10 days, there were no fines assessed. He didn't do it, he didn't pay in 10 days. No fines, no late fees. He just said, okay, you're going to get licensed, you've got 10 days to get licensed, end of story.
Mhm.
And the late fee was, non-existent. He didn't do it, went back to court the third time, nothing, bless you. And I can't remember the fourth time, I think by the fourth time, he just closed his shop down.
But let's remember,
So-
this is just one case that
Yes.
has been
Right,
raised.
that's
so
one
it's
case,
not-
but
Well, sometimes it's the exception that makes the rule, so thankfully, not since that you had to put yourself through that and not be compensated for it.
Well, it's not even, I mean, I'm a salaried employee, so it's not even that as much as, I have a personal life too. So you come here and, this is fries, but you come here and when you go to court, you wait for them to call your case.
Yeah, it's a process.
And I was here for 3 hours, all 4 times, hoping that he was going to show twice, and he did. So, but like I said, that is the exception, not the rule. Our restaurants are wonderful. He was just, very, very bad
Yeah, bad player.
business person.
Yeah.
But that's the exception, not the rule. However, if that does come up in the future, we'd just like to have some penalty that we could at least recover.
Well, let's see what an ordinance would say to put that in. It's just not fair to any employee. I was NL, which would, when I worked for the state, and that's, they call you, you're there till 10 o'clock, that was my category. So, and you weren't compensated for it unless your boss gave you the day off or something. But we cherish our employees in the city, respect what they do, and my feeling is that they should be compensated for lost time protecting the city. And that's kind of like a mayor council thing to talk about going forward. But I think we should try to make the fee come out of, if possible, the applicants, to the applicant. And sometimes you can't do that, so I think we should just talk about how we handle that.
Okay. I think unless there are any other compelling and new points on this, we will turn it over to Cindy to do some further analysis. I'm sorry, Council President? Oh, okay.
So the next is the, for fees for use of public property. So we have two different things. We have our parks and then we have facilities. And so lately we're getting a lot of calls from people who want to do a photo shoot, who want to use a facility for a wedding, and $25 is kind of, it's a small fee to ask. So Parks and Recreation is first going to take a look at this and take a look at a resident fee and a non-resident fee. And there are some other municipalities that separate it in that way. We may want to take a look at a resident fee and maybe an HOA fee, and maybe take a look at a special event ordinance and put photo shoots or something like that into that category. People are now shooting commercials, which I think is great, but we should have some parameters and boundaries, and there is a cost to that, and the cost often is the police department. Where my office, we spend a lot of time trying to corral paperwork and get certificates of insurance and those type of things. So that, I think, is coming soon.
I would suggest that, and we talked about this years ago, about bringing our ordinances up or our permit fees up to a level, especially when it comes to motion picture and commercial production, because in my other hat, getting a city or township ready to be able to handle and charge back a producer for using the city just to get our call. This isn't to make money, this is to be able, police officers got to stand on a corner or gets assigned to it like in a construction job. We should look at that, and I know that Janice is on the board of the New Jersey Motion Picture and Television Commission, right? So maybe we could see what that township has come up with. As far as I know, Hoboken's got, has motion picture production legislation, and it's not to make money, it's to protect our costs for someone coming here. And just so everyone knows out there, the Motion Picture Television Commission has a huge library of photos of this city and of every city within a certain radius of Philadelphia that's in the Jersey side, and also on the northern part of the state. So, to address that use, let's think about, as long as we're going to start to look into charging residents and non-residents, let's come up with something that's boilerplate that we more than likely can get a copy from the state of other municipalities' ordinances to help us handle that type of event.
Thank you. Bill, I was just going to ask Bill if this was something that he might do a little research on. Sure. Thank you.
I think that's an important point, but it's sort of a separate
Yes.
point from
Yeah.
like
Right.
somebody wants to have the pavilion for an hour for
Right.
dinner,
Yeah.
Right, I just
Yeah.
went off of that one comment.
No, but it's good. I mean, when people are doing that, they need to be paying too. what it costs us to allow them to do that.
I thought we, at one point, excuse me, Mayor, I think at one time, we had a security deposit or a cleaning fee. Is that the $25?
There is, no, it's a use fee is $25. We asked for a security deposit of $250 currently. And Parks and Rec is going to take a look at their piece. I think the security deposit is actually fine. We have not had any issues with that. But it's the $25 fee. I think it's, if you really take a look, now this again is on SDL, so it's $1,700, you know. You got to, at some point, take a look at your cost, and $25 is very low.
Well, obviously, it doesn't cover our expenses to manage it, and we have to keep track of every building and.
It's electric, it's heat,
everything, yeah,
it's air
so-
Well,
conditioning.
I think it's a fair way to move on.
In taking a look at 8 different municipalities within a 10-mile radius of here, though, the security deposit is the lowest. Second lowest, sorry. There is one municipality that hasn't dealt with this issue, so it's free. But the average is $500, and some charge more because the cost of repair has grown. It's higher.
And that's why we started the security deposit, because we were concerned about.
We had an event
Yeah.
in Mary Sheridan Park, and somebody dug up all the flowers.
Yeah. Yeah, so Mayor, that would be something that you would want to take care of. But, yeah, that's why we started that, to hold people to their words and responsibilities about using property that's literally owned by everyone that's sitting here that's a taxpayer. So we're trying to protect our assets and then again, make it cost effective to be able to police it. And I think that's a great idea.
Okay, thank you. We will look into those fees and we'll circle back. I think that concludes, let's see, our topics of discussion for the evening, which now allows us to move to the public participation part of our meeting. So public comment, I see some new faces for public comment since I was elected. I just want to highlight a couple of things about the public comment period at city council meetings. We do ask that members of the public, if they are able to step to the designated podium unless they have flexibility issues or mobility issues, in which case just let me know. We ask members of the public to state their name and address. We allow uninterrupted remarks and or questions from the public to 3 minutes, and you can just go straight through 3 minutes, and at that, once that's over, we will either, well, you have 3 minutes, and you're not allowed to address any specific council member or any other person except by permission of the majority of the council. And we typically allow the members of the public who are present in the room to speak first, and then we go to Zoom. Lastly, the chair, myself, or the council members may respond, but we may not. So, but we want you to know that we listen and we hear you, and there we have it. So, are there members of the public who wish to make a, please step to the podium, state your name and address, and proceed with your question or comment.
Hi, everyone. I'm Karen Gadbois, owner of Union Coffee. I'm also a resident of Live on York Street, currently 30 York, moving to 68 York in a week. I thank you so much for your conversation, your insightful conversation today. I just want to talk a little bit about some of the proposed parking things, just to put a bug in your ear regarding, whatever you just do moving forward. So I run a coffee shop, so it's pretty quick serve a lot of times, but a lot of folks do sit. And so I was looking at some of your proposed parking changes, or just some of the numbers, and my notes are kind of all over the place, and it's a little late. It's been a long day, as you know. So currently, proposing the change to $2 an hour is going to take us to 7.5 minutes per quarter. And I don't know if that, I just like looking at the numbers of what a person's time is worth and what they're doing with their time when they're paying a meter, so at 7.5 minutes, what can you do with 7.5 minutes? Like, you put a quarter in the meter and you begin to walk to your destination. I run a coffee shop, so I'm selling a $2 cup of coffee. So in 7.5 minutes, or I'm selling a $4 cup of coffee. coffee, or a sandwich. Well, it might take me 5 minutes to make a sandwich. Now my customer now has to put 2 quarters in order to get a sandwich and a cup of coffee. Their sandwich and cup of coffee just increased, you know, by 50 cents for their time, and that's if they're in and out and there is no line. You know, so proposing it then, if you're currently at $12, or 12 minutes per quarter. I have a lot of customers that come in asking me for quarters as part of my business. My team, they're all young, they're accustomed to saying, oh, do you know we do Park Mobile? Do you know we do Park Mobile? Do you have Park Mobile? Here it is. We like walk them through downloading the app. Like, signage down on my end of the street is non-existent pretty much. And again, I'm gonna jump all over because my notes are in Sharpie and they're all over the place. But some of the conversations you were having regarding the price to maintain your meters and the price of changing out the the mechanics, and if you could even get them, a lot of that could be addressed by better signage for Park Mobile. Almost no one knows. A lot of people don't know that it's usable. They don't read the zone numbers as meaning anything to them. They don't understand what it means. They don't. The icon, the Park Mobile icon, isn't even visible anywhere. So you could spend a few $1,000s probably on signage, and it would save you thousands of dollars down the road. Just as a fundamental cost savings type thing, it's spreading information. People are much more willing to pour money out of their debit card than they are in quarters. Quarters are also really hard to come by. And there was a shortage earlier this year due to COVID, if you all remember. So, and banks are closed on weekends. So I go to the bank on a Friday, I get 6 rolls of quarters, I'm out by Monday. I have a limit, I give one customer $1. And my staff has to navigate giving one customer $1, and people get irritated with us. And these are little things, and they're choices that we've made as a business, but something to consider when you're talking about proposed fee increases is that you're asking you're asking customers to come in, they're asking for multiple dollars in quarters, they can't get them, they don't want to stay, they don't want to walk around, and it could have an impact on the business community at large. $4 an hour for Park Mobile after 2 to 4 hours, that's 3 3/4 minutes per quarter. Like, what can you even do with 3 3/4 minutes? Like, that's not even 4 minutes of time. You know, that's as much time as I have at this podium right now for a quarter. You know, so when you look at the price increase and you look at the minimum wage in our state going up by $1 per hour, from $12 to $13 an hour, and you're proposing raising parking for 75 cents per hour, that seems like a really steep jump considering that your average worker is only possibly earning $1 more per hour for that amount of time. So I would like you to consider those kind of, that differential when you're talking about employees that are working in these small businesses, that a lot of them can find free parking, a lot of them can't, or if they're working a 5 or 6 hour shift, you're now taking you're not taking an entire hour out of their work day in order to pay for parking to work at the job that they're employed at. So as an employer, it can be challenging to navigate that, and so you have to find ways around that. So those are just all things that I think about when I think about parking. I understand that you should increase parking in relation to inflation, and because if you don't do it over a period of time, all of a sudden you want to catch up, and we want to catch up to the other towns that are prospering, and you know, their business communities are prospering, and I understand that as well, that there is no issue there. But I think there needs to be an incremental, as you referenced, an incremental pace to that. That also takes into consideration the minimum wage increases in our community and how we are dealing with that as a business community. Possible options, different tiered pricing or weekday versus weekend, so that you're not penalizing locals. My business is like 80% locals on the weekdays, and then the weekends we get the visitors, and I'm like, you know, great, tourism, awesome, let's make $1 on the tourists, sure, but like most of my customers are regulars, and so maybe there's a way to do weekday pricing versus weekend pricing. I don't want to say surge pricing, but you know, that's whatever, peak pricing.
I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to ask you to wind down.
Sure thing, no
5
problem.
minutes.
Better signage, employee passes or business passes for their employees, or registering employee license plates so that they're not getting tickets is an option if you choose to raise to a certain rate. And lastly, regarding the proposed change to the business fees, I agree on the split. Who said that? Splitting it back to under 50 over 50 for the $100 fee. Thank you.
Thank you.
I just want to make one comment. Cindy will remind me if I'm misremembering. I think that we discussed the weekend fee versus weekday fee in 2019. I think that's something we should really seriously consider, but I think Park Mobile doesn't allow it.
Well, not only, I don't think it's Park Mobile. I think we probably could do that through Park Mobile, but we have digital meters. You set that rate
That's what
and
it was,
that's
it was
it.
digital. So
Right,
it could
it's
be, if we're
hardwired.
going to switch
Yeah.
to more programmable options, that is something we can consider,
Right.
more
Yeah,
easily, we can more
and
easily consider.
If I may, thank you for that. Park Mobile they did it in Princeton has Park Mobile, they can change their programs for based on zones and usage, like if we're trying to, and it uses a management tool that the most visited spots become more expensive, and they have 5,000 parking space, but it's more flexibility in that way. And the meters take less than a quarter to start.
They can, but almost nobody asks
All right,
for
well,
less than a
let's,
quarter.
I don't want to get involved
Yeah,
in
sorry,
that.
I
We
apologize.
don't do the back and forth.
Oh, no,
I
okay.
apologize.
Well, thank you for your input.
Okay.
Other members of the, yes, please step to the podium, state your name and address, and feel free to share your question or your statement.
I'm Amy Koss. I own Sojourner at 26 Bridge Street. I do not live in the city. I have been commenting on parking in this room and other rooms since 1990. Unlike Carolyn, my business is a longer stay. I have people who are trying on clothes, who are planning jewelry projects, who are typically, some people spend only a couple of minutes with me, but most people spend half an hour, 45 minutes, an hour, or maybe even an hour and a half. And I am seeing an increase in the number of people who say, oh, I can't try this on. And they say, I have to go, my meter's running out. And I am seeing that increasingly again and again. So while I understand that there are budget crunches, I do believe that the meters and the shortness of the time take business away from longer-term businesses like myself. I also would urge the council to consider emptying the meters more often. I am on Saturdays, Sundays, helping people. They can't put any more money in the meter because that chute is full. So you're losing money there. As we see residential permits increase in the central business district, you are also losing money there, because every one of those spaces is now not available to meters, and as we all know, many more people are working at home and working all day, and I see resident permits that are out in the central business district, and they're not moving. So that's revenue you're losing, and that's spaces that I'm losing that could be potential customers, much as I love my neighbors, and they are wonderful people, for sure. But and finally, to the food permits, although I don't currently own a restaurant, I had a gold seal from the Department of Health, and I would really urge you, if you're spending money for re-inspections, to charge those restaurants for those re-inspections, rather than to raise the fees across the board and punish your restaurants who are doing the right thing and paying their employees to clean every night.
Thank you. Other members of the public in the room? Just state your name and your address, please.
Evening Council, members of the community. My name is Rebens Harris. I am the new Executive Director for the Greater Lambertville Chamber of Commerce. I have spent this last several hours and probably the last 2 days receiving nothing but phone calls and emails from the business community in an absolute panic that has been created by this dialogue. They are sympathetic in their dissent. They are very sympathetic, understanding that the city does need to make its revenue and it does need to be able to keep that revenue in place in order to be able to move forward with providing services to the businesses. They also understand that any additional tax, as they perceive it, might break their backs. Because at this point, things are so incredibly tight in light of the pandemic recovery, the item recovery, and all of the other things that are going on, be it the recession or other, that have been impacting our businesses, has caused absolute panic as people are struggling to put their pieces back together and maintain their business in this community. I have 2 businesses that have closed, and I have another one that can't even open because they can't staff at this point. And adding additional pressures to things like a $4 charge after 4 hours Take somebody who makes minimum wage for $104 a day on an 8-hour shift, and takes almost 25% of their income from that day out of their pocket just to cover their parking fees. It is absolutely not a viable option at this point for our small businesses and our micro businesses to be able to handle that kind of a burden. Additionally, Councilwoman Taylor, you mentioned the point that often is made, my business can't handle it. Let's look at those real numbers, and I appreciate that because those numbers I'm curious about as well. The only thing I have to ask is this. When we consider looking into that, Princeton and New Hope are not comparable communities to ours. We specialize in micro and hobby businesses. We have smaller amounts of people. We don't make our money in nightlife and in alcohol sales and all of those kinds of things. We focus on small shops. We focus on business services. We focus on people who employ less than 5 or 10 in the majority of our businesses. There are always exceptions. But when we find that comparable community, let's make sure that it is comparable, also dealing with the fallout from IDA, fallout from the pandemic, et cetera. A better comparison perhaps in terms of our businesses might be Yardley or Frenchtown or something, those areas. However, we also acknowledge and recognize that they're not comparable in their government structures because the burden that we have here is very, very different. We know that. The community is happy to step forward. The business community is happy to step forward and engage in this conversation with you. We do have a number of recommendations and things to consider and questions to ask. Tonight may not be the exact opportunity to do that, but we do excuse me, look forward to the opportunity of engaging in those conversations. I have a number of larger businesses who have stepped forward and expressed interest in finding ways of helping the city address some of its other problems, which may make this issue far less important in terms of covering our bases. So please know the community is there to assist. I know I'm probably reaching my time, but I have been asked by 2 additional businesses to speak on their behalf. One has very clearly stated, he said that he asks that I point out that the city will be receiving a 2% tax on the sales of cannabis, and he hopes that that would shore up the budget quite nicely. That is from Mr. Roland Bohm, who is over at Monopoly. Brian Schreck also made a really fascinating point, being a person who works in the business of food industry, that it's difficult, much in line of what our other businesses have stated. It's very difficult when you're scrambling, trying to make food for people who are on the clock. And then you get out only to find out that you weren't able to make your meter charge, excuse me, your meter payments, because you yourself were distracted trying to make sure that they made theirs. So one thing that could possibly be consideration is maybe even going so far forward as to provide a $25 a month fee provided for parking passes for employees and employers, so that they're not having to make those challenges for their own employees. There are a lot of other options. There's some individuals who have also stepped forward and expressed interest in working with the city on looking to develop properties, to step forward to address issues of housing in the area, and those 2 might provide additional resources for us to consider. So the chamber is at your service. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else in the room? That's good. Mike, is there anybody?
No, we have 5 attendees and no hands raised.
Okay, 5 attendees and no hands raised. I would just make also a note that I did receive an email from Dean and Lisa Stevens today, also noting that perhaps a lower amount would be something to consider rather than starting at $2 an hour. So I do note that these people who have been in our community and had a business for 40 years have also noted that they would prefer, if we were going to do anything, to keep it to 25 cents. So if there are no other comments or questions from the public, I would like a motion to close the public comment period of the meeting.
So moved.
All right, is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. We'd like to thank the members of the public for coming this evening. We will be in closed session to consider some contract questions. So at this time, Okay, do I have to have a motion to go into closed?
Yeah.
Can I have a motion to go into closed session, please?
Don't move.
Second,
For the purpose of,
contract.
okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. This time we would like to thank the public, and we will need to ask you to leave the room. Thank you, and good night.
Thank you.